Welcome back, and today we have another week of Broadway grosses, and this is a very interesting week because there was a lot of decreases despite the many Tony nominations that most of these musicals got, so let's get into it. So & Juliet did 92% last week and 80% this week, falling almost $200,000 from $1,019,715 to $824K. Is & Juliet in any trouble? No, but it definitely is not a very encouraging week, mainly because, & Juliet, roughly should not go past like $850K, and because of the licensing and royalties for the songs that they use, this definitely is not a positive week for them. But again, & Juliet has had a couple of very weak weeks in its lifetime. So again, is it cause for concern? No, but it is very wow, surprising, because it has fallen into the 800K area, but it hasn't gone this low before, I believe. Again, if & Juliet started doing 7s and 6s and 5s, then it would close, but it's not going to close anytime soon. But yeah, just an interesting development. A Beautiful Noise, and that is closing next month, did 68% last week and 54% this week, and 952K last week and 757K this week. Back to the Future did 91% last week and 79% this week, going from 1,091,853 to 845K, which was a 246K drop. Obviously, this was not ideal for Back to the Future. It definitely has had a lot more weaker weeks than they probably were expecting. And a lot of people are saying it's going to close. It's not going to close. It's made a lot of money in the winter and when it first opened last summer. And it's going to make a ton of money in the summer. It just seems like it's very dependent on tourists, and that when tourists aren't here, it definitely is not as appealing to New Yorkers or even people that just want to see a show, mainly because it's probably not that good. But anyways, it's fine. It's doing absolutely fine. But it definitely has seen some very interesting weeks, as even I would have not have predicted it would have done this bad in its first year. You think maybe the second year, the third year, but I do think this is because of the huge amount of musicals that are on Broadway at the current moment, and how so many of them are movie musicals, and people got a lot to choose from. You got Back to the Future and Great Gatsby on the same, opposite sides of the street. So it's very competitive out there. Cabaret is almost made $2 million, selling out a 224 average ticket. I think this was the highest average ticket, out of all of the shows, I think. Yeah, it was. And it made 1,701,828 last week and 1,920,289 this week. So some amazing numbers despite bad reviews. Hadestown did 99% last week and 94% this week, going from 853K to 734K, which is its weakest week since, I believe, February. 734K is still good for Hadestown, but again, I would like to see it stay in that 800K plus range. And ideally, you don't want to see it you want to see it go as low as 750, more or less, as, once we get to the low 700s and 600s, that's when it's cause for concern. Now, I think it's done well enough that it will make it until at least next year. But again, it is proving the point that Hadestown has, definitely gotten the steam kicked out of it over the past couple of years, and the stunt casting is a latest example of them trying to save a show that is slowly dying. But I don't think it's going to close anytime soon. Hamilton did 98% this week or last week and 95% this week, which is a pretty low capacity for Hamilton. And last week it did 1,847,152, and this week it did 1,732,853. Still amazing numbers, but low for Hamilton. Hell's Kitchen is continuing to be like one of the most successful new musicals of the season. In fact, I think besides Merrily and Cabaret, I think that this is the most successful new musical, despite it getting audiences not liking it. It did 99% capacity for both weeks, and 1,270,519 this week, compared to last week's 1,290,438. So again, I'm not a huge fan of Hell's Kitchen. Mainly, I haven't seen it, but I don't think I'd like it. But it definitely seems like it is doing solid business. But hey, I mean, the jukebox musical's power is unparalleled in some cases. And then in some cases, like Heart of Rock and Roll, it doesn't work out that well. I definitely do think the Tony nominations helped Hell's Kitchen a lot. I think it legitimized it so that a lot of people are now seeing it. But it will be interesting to see, because I think it will do well over the summer, but I could see this like not doing good and falling heavily in the fall and closing in January. So that still, I think, is a pretty solid reality. But again, I'm looking at these numbers and I'm like, even though like audiences don't like it, like I think this might have a life. So I definitely think we won't know how long it will last until the summer is over. So that's like mid-August, because I think it will do over $1 million or 900,000 at the lowest until at least August. Illinois, for 7 performances, went from 91% to 91%, and 728K to 684K. And last week they had 8 performances as well. They're keeping the average ticket pretty low at $79. Now 684K for a new musical, it's decent. It's not great, and obviously, I think investors were hoping it would get into the 800K area because of the Tony nominations, but I do think Illinois is a very high concept show that's hard to understand, and I think that while it is a popular album, it definitely is it's a dance musical, and I don't think everyone's going to love that. And it did open very late, so I think there's some people that are just like, whoa, what is this show? Like, this is what? Like, Illinois, who? So I do think, but compared to A Strange Loop and Akimbo, that were the top contenders for Best Musical, it's outselling both of those quite well, and assuming this wins Best Musical, this would be the best performing financially successful, no, this is the best performing financial Best Musical winner since, I believe, Hadestown. And again, I think that, this definitely has the potential to get to 8s and 9s. It's very realistic. And I think if it wins Best Musical, it can definitely get into that $1 million club. And I do wonder, even if they don't win the Tony, will they extend if the business goes up? I don't see this being a $1 million plus hit the way like Hell's Kitchen is, but it could get to that way. Again, I think Illinois is very experimental. It's like Fantasia, basically. And Fantasia didn't do well at the box office. Hell's Kitchen is a traditional musical. I think if Illinois was a more traditional musical, I think it would have done even better. Because it is very experimental downtown, despite it being the most mainstream new musical that's, on its way to winning Best Musical most likely. Since, in the past couple years. But definitely an interesting development. Could be doing worse. And it's like, I think like 3rd or 4th best performing musical. So it's doing decent. And I do think those numbers will get higher. Lempicka, and that is closing. I don't know if did I say Lempicka was going to close in the last video? I don't know. Lempicka's closing, but no surprise. And while the capacity went up from 71% to 83%, the average ticket is a whopping $39. And last week it did 288K, and this week 275. A shame, because I really liked Lempicka. My review is coming out this week, probably, but I'm definitely upset that it's closing. Merrily sold out, going from 1,464,492 to 1,435,572. So it's not doing the gigantic numbers in the fall, but it is still doing amazing. It's one of the best-selling musicals now, so they don't have much to complain about. Moulin Rouge did 99% for both weeks. Last week, 1,433,475, and this week, 1,405,859. 6 went from 89% to 86%, and 845K to 765K. Some people might be concerned, but 6 is doing perfectly fine at 765. It could do 7s and 6s consistently, and it would be doing absolutely fine. It's not a very expensive musical. Obviously, if it went to the 5s and the 4s, that's when I'd start getting concerned. But if you're a 6 fan, don't be nervous. Suffs went from 77% to 80%, and 630K to 630K. Specifically went from 169 to 781. So Suffs definitely is doing okay. I mean, it's not doing amazing, but it could be doing a lot worse. And for a musical that's it's a prestige musical in the sense that it is vying for Best Musical, and it's one of those musicals that is, like, beholden on getting a Best Musical nomination in order to survive. So right now it's just getting by, like, just barely. But I do think this will start to shudder and not do so well as the summer goes on, and I think it will close, in the winter, I think, or maybe earlier, but I don't think it's going to win Best Musical. I mean, if it does, I'll be surprised, but it will definitely help its box office, because it's in an in-between place now, but it could be doing worse. Sweeney had its last week and sold out, going from 1,519,739 to 1,762,444, and Tibet and Son Foster are certified box office draws. So it'll be interesting to see when they come back. I definitely think they should take some time off, so as not to, like, overexpose themselves and, keep that allure, that prestige of their name intact. Gatsby's hanging on just by a thread, despite the capacity going down from 97% to 83%, with 1,028,276 last week and 1,049,784 this week. I think Gatsby is going to do good over the summer and continue to maintain 1 million and high 900s. I think the fall will be the big test, and I think that Gatsby will not pass that test. But I was wrong about Gatsby, so I could be wrong now, but it definitely is losing some of the momentum it was building, but it is getting by, and it is doing good box office. The Heart of Rock and Roll, I mean, when is that going to close? 287K this week, 371K last week, 68% last week, 70% this week. It's over. The Notebook surprisingly fell pretty heavily from 91% to 82%, and 772K to 673K, which is and big, alarm bells, red flags should be waving for the Notebook, because it has such a brand recognition and should be able to overcome the bad reviews and lack of Tony noms. And clearly, the brand is not strong enough, which is very concerning. For the Notebook, 673, any show that's going under 700,000 is in trouble. And 673 is not good at all. It's not failing, but it definitely is an interesting development, where I do wonder, could the Notebook be the surprise, flop of the season? And if it doesn't make $1 million over the summer, I predict it will close. So definitely did not see this coming for the Notebook, and very interested to see how it goes. The Outsiders is doing fantastic. Last week it did 97%. This week it did 98%. And 923K last week and 894K this week. The Who's Tommy went from 86% to 78%, a steep decline in capacity, going from 1,064,542 to 910K. The Wiz went from 98% to 94%, and 1,611,118 to 1,458,478, proving that the Tony Awards and the bad reviews had no impact on The Wiz. And then Water for Elephants, to cap it off, went from 84% to 82%, and 1,038,304 to 1,010,054. So it is just barely getting by, but it is still making $1 million. However, I think it will fall once we get into the fall, and I think it will close. So overall, a pretty interesting week, some interesting developments, some things we already knew, some closings we're anticipating, and I'm excited to see how the rest of this month pans out for the new musicals, and what's going to see declines and what's going to see upticks. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.